29 years old, I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I work in remote tech support, so I basically spend the entire day at home. At that time, I was trying to save some money and also distract myself a bit. So I got back into playing video games after years. I didn't want to spend much on a new console, so I started looking at listings on Craigslist, which is still pretty common here for that kind of thing. I found a listing from a guy selling a relatively new Xbox for a price below normal. Nothing absurd, but cheap enough to catch my attention. The description was simple, few photos, and the guy said he needed to sell it quickly because he was moving. I messaged him, he replied quickly, seemed straightforward, no nonsense. We agreed that I would pick it up the same night, because he said he worked during the day. The address he sent was in a more remote area, about 25 minutes from where I live, almost leaving the city, heading into a more residential and spaced out region. That wasn't unusual. A lot of people live farther out around here. Even so, I remember thinking it was a bit far for something so simple, but since the price was good, I decided to go. I left home around 7 p.m. It was already getting dark, that kind of dark gray sky typical here when there isn't much street lighting. As I kept driving, the streets started getting emptier. Less movement, fewer businesses, just spaced out houses and some large trees along the sides. The GPS led me down a main road and then told me to turn onto a smaller street, practically without lighting, just a few widely spaced streetlights. The houses there were already farther apart from each other, with large yards and some without fences. I slowed down because there was almost no one on the street, and I wanted to check the house numbers carefully. The address he gave me was something like 1847, and I was looking, 1839, 1843, and then it just jumped to 1855. I thought that was strange right away. I backed up slightly to check again, looking on both sides of the street. And really, between two houses, there was just an empty lot, kind of covered with low grass, with no construction at all. There was no mailbox, no sign, nothing. Just that dark, empty lot in the middle. I stopped the car in front, a bit confused, and grabbed my phone to check his message again to see if I had written it down wrong. At that moment, I already started to feel that strange sensation that something wasn't adding up. While I was looking at the conversation on my phone, I saw that the address was exactly how I had typed it into the GPS, so it wasn't my mistake. I thought about sending him a message, but before I could even type anything, a notification came in. It was him. The message said something like, "Have you arrived? Wait a little further down the street, I'm almost there." That gave me a weird feeling right away, because if he lived there, it didn't make sense for him not to know that that number didn't exist. Even so, I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe he had typed the wrong number on purpose for safety or something, so he wouldn't expose his house in the listing. That's actually common in online sales. So I started the car again and moved forward very slowly, looking around, trying to see if someone would appear. An open garage, a light turning on, any sign of someone waiting for me. But the street remained completely empty, just those more distant houses and a kind of heavy silence. No sound of people, no TV, no dogs barking, nothing. That's when I noticed in the rearview mirror. A car turned onto the same street I was on, coming from the direction I had entered. At first I didn't think much of it, but what caught my attention was that it was moving way too slowly, and with its headlights off. That's not normal here, especially on a dark street like that. I automatically stopped the car again, kind of instinctively, as if I was waiting for it to pass or do something. But it didn't pass. It stopped a few meters behind me and stayed there. I could only see the outline of the car in the dark, but I couldn't see who was inside. At that moment, my body tensed up. I felt that drop in my stomach and a pressure in my chest, like my body had understood something before my mind did. I tried to convince myself it could just be someone from the street arriving home, but then another message came through on my phone. It was the same guy. "Stay there. I can already see you." That gave me immediate discomfort, because I wasn't seeing anyone except that car parked behind me. I immediately looked around again, trying to figure out where he could be seeing me from. The houses there had almost all their lights off, some with a faint porch light, but nothing that would let me see someone watching from inside. The empty lot was still there beside me, dark, with no movement at all. I looked in the rearview mirror again, trying to force my eyes to see inside the car that had stopped behind me, but I couldn't make out anything beyond the vehicle's shape. Then my phone vibrated again. Another message. "You can get out, I'm further ahead." That made no sense at all. I was literally in the middle of the street. There was no one in front, no car, no person. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I automatically locked the doors and stayed there, trying to decide what to do. My heart was already racing, and I started noticing small things like the sound of the engine running, the light noise of the wind hitting the trees, and the strange silence of that street. I thought about just leaving, but at the same time, a part of me was still trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe he was in a house further ahead, and I hadn't seen him. So I put the car in gear very slowly, intending to continue down the street and get out of there. But the moment my car started moving, the car behind me also moved. It wasn't coincidence. It was immediate, like it had been waiting for me to decide. It moved forward with me, keeping the same short distance. That's when the feeling changed into something else. It wasn't just strange anymore. It was clearly wrong. I started sweating cold. My hands got a bit damp on the steering wheel, and my mind was already thinking about an exit route, making a U-turn, anything to get out of there. But the street was narrow, and there wasn't an easy place to turn the car around without maneuvering. And with that car right behind me, it got even worse. I kept moving forward, now a bit faster, trying to stay calm, but with my mind racing. I looked at the GPS and saw that the street ended further ahead in some kind of tight curve, not a direct exit to a larger road like I had imagined. That made me even more tense, because it meant I would probably have to turn around up there. The car behind me kept following at exactly the same speed, without turning on its headlights, which only made everything worse. I started thinking about several things at once. Whether it could be some kind of scam, whether the guy from the listing was inside that car, whether there were more people involved. My phone vibrated again on the dashboard mount, and I hesitated before looking. When I did, the message said, "Don't leave now." That really shook me, because I hadn't said anything. I hadn't told him I was leaving, and still he knew exactly what I was about to do. At that point, I wasn't trying to understand anything anymore. I just wanted to get out of there. When I got near the curve, I noticed there was a gravel entrance on the right, like a small open area, probably used to access some lot. Without thinking much, I turned sharply into it, kicking up some dust. My plan was simple. Use that space to make a quick U-turn and get out of the street as fast as possible. But the moment I turned in, the car behind me suddenly accelerated, pulled in right after me into the same entrance, and stopped at an angle that practically blocked the exit. It all happened very fast. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck, and my breathing became short. I froze for a second, my foot on the brake, trying to process what was happening, while my headlights partially illuminated the side of the other vehicle. Even so, I still couldn't clearly see who was inside. At that moment, everything in my body was already in full alert mode. I didn't think about anything else besides getting out of there. I threw the car into reverse hard, turning the wheel quickly to try to slip past the side before he could adjust better. I heard the gravel crunching loudly under the car, and for a second I thought I was going to hit something, because the space was tight and the other car was poorly positioned on purpose. When I managed to align just enough, I accelerated and got back onto the main street without even properly checking if another car was coming. As soon as I got onto the street, I stepped on it and started putting as much distance as possible. In the rearview mirror, I saw that the car also left the entrance right after me, still without headlights, and started following me again. That made my stomach drop. I was driving way too fast for a street like that, but I didn't care anymore. I just wanted distance. I took the first turn that led back to a bigger road, vaguely remembering the way I had come. As I approached a slightly more lit area, with more houses and some parked cars, I saw in the rearview mirror that the car finally started to slow down. It wasn't all at once, it was gradual, like it was deciding whether to keep going or not. Then after a few seconds, it just stopped in the middle of the street and didn't follow anymore. I kept driving for a few more minutes, still with my heart racing, constantly checking the mirrors to make sure I wasn't being followed. When I finally reached a busier avenue, that's when I started to slow down. My hands were shaking on the wheel, and it took me a while to breathe normally again. When I stopped at a gas station, still with the engine running, I just stared at my phone trying to understand what had just happened. There was one more message from him, sent a few minutes earlier. "You left too early." I didn't reply. I didn't block him right away either. I just stared at it for a few seconds, feeling a discomfort that's hard to explain. It didn't feel like just a deal that went wrong. It felt more like I had gotten out of something that could have been much worse if I had done anything differently, like getting out of the car when he asked. I deleted the conversation afterward and never contacted him again. To this day, when I think about it, what bothers me the most isn't even the car following me. It's the fact that at several moments it felt like he knew exactly what I was doing before I even did it. Story 2. I am a woman, I'm 27 years old, and I live in the Indianapolis area in Indiana. This happened at the end of a summer, when I was trying to clean out my apartment because I was going to renew my lease and wanted to get rid of a lot of accumulated stuff. I've always had the habit of selling clothes online instead of donating them right away, especially pieces that were practically new and that I knew someone would easily buy. I had listed some light jackets, jeans, boots, and a few blouses in a local sales group, and also on another secondhand app. Nothing out of the ordinary. I had done this kind of sale several times before, and I always tried to meet in a public place during the day, because everyone says it here all the time. Never meet a buyer near your home, never give too much information, never make it easy. So I followed that very strictly. On that specific day, a woman had shown interest in several items at once, which for me was great because it meant getting everything done in one outing. Her profile picture was normal. She looked like a woman in her 40s, and the conversation had been very straightforward, nothing strange. She suggested meeting in the parking lot of a small shopping center that was between my job and my apartment in the early afternoon. I agreed because it was a busy place, with stores, a pharmacy, a coffee shop, people coming and going all the time. It seemed like one of the safest options possible. I left work a little early that day, with the clothes separated into 2 bags in the back seat. I remember it was hot, but that heavy, suffocating kind of heat, and I got into the car already tired, wanting to get it over with quickly and go home. The parking lot was busy enough for me to feel comfortable, but not so crowded that it was hard to park near the store entrances. I parked near a home goods store and sent her a message telling her where I was. She replied almost immediately saying she had already seen me. That made me automatically look around, because I hadn't clearly seen anyone coming toward me yet. A few seconds later, a woman appeared walking between the cars, giving me a slight wave. At first glance, she looked completely normal. Hair tied back, large sunglasses, plain t-shirt, jeans, shoulder bag. Nothing about her stood out. She even smiled when she got close to my car, in that polite, slightly awkward way people do when meeting a stranger. I got out, opened the back door, and showed her the bags. The beginning of the conversation was completely normal. She picked up a piece, looked at the tag, asked about the size of another, commented that her niece might like one of the blouses. Her voice was calm, low, and she spoke like anyone would in a casual purchase. For the first few minutes, I genuinely thought it would just be another quick sale like so many others I had done. After a few minutes of looking through the clothes, she started making more casual comments, like someone trying to keep the conversation going to avoid awkward silence. She asked if I lived far from there, if I worked nearby, very normal things. I answered vaguely, like I always do, just saying I worked in the area and that the location was convenient for me. Then, at a somewhat random moment, she said something like, "Oh, you usually leave early like that, right? I think I've seen you passing by around 8-something in the morning." That caught me off guard. I gave a kind of automatic laugh as if it were a coincidence and said something like, "Oh, maybe, a lot of people pass by there at that time." But inside, that already triggered an alarm. I did leave home almost every day at that time, but it wasn't something I had ever mentioned to her, and it wasn't something obvious from my profile either. I tried to ignore it and kept showing the clothes, trying to keep the situation normal. But she continued. She picked up a jacket and commented, "This will look good for you to wear when you go out at night. You live on a higher floor, right? It's not too windy up there?" At that moment, I froze inside. I live on the 4th floor of a small building without an elevator, and that's not something easily visible from the outside, much less something I would mention in a clothing listing. I felt my body tense slightly, like when you're not sure if you heard something correctly. I asked, trying to sound natural. "What do you mean?" And she just shrugged as if it were a random comment and said, "Nothing. It just seems like it I don't know. The way she said it wasn't strange in tone, it was strange in content. Because it didn't feel like a guess, it felt too specific to be a coincidence. At that point, I was no longer comfortable. I started wanting to end it as quickly as possible. Even without fully understanding what was happening, I began putting the clothes back into the bag, saying I could give her a better price if she took everything, just to speed things up. She didn't show real interest in closing the deal. She just kept looking at the items in a distracted way, as if that was secondary. Her attention seemed more on me than on the clothes. At one point, while I was folding a blouse, she said with the same natural tone as before, "Your building has that side staircase, right? The one that's kind of hidden. Do you use it sometimes when you get home late?" That gave me a real shock. It wasn't something generic anymore. It was too specific. The side staircase of my building isn't visible from the main street. You can only see it if you go into the internal parking area. And I would never, under any circumstance, mention something like that in a sale conversation. My stomach dropped immediately. I felt my heart race, and I became more aware of everything around me. People walking by, cars, trying to ground myself again in a safe environment. I gave a short, slightly cold answer like, "No, I don't even know what you're talking about," and closed the bag harder than usual. I had already decided I wasn't going to sell anything to her. I said I had another commitment and needed to leave. She didn't argue, didn't try to negotiate, didn't insist on buying. She just looked at me for a second longer than normal, with a faint smile that didn't seem exactly friendly, just too neutral. That gave me a discomfort that's hard to explain. I grabbed the bags, put them back in the back seat, and got into the car quickly, locking the doors as soon as I sat down. As I put on my seatbelt, I looked through the window and saw that she hadn't moved away. She was standing in the same spot, looking directly at me, not checking her phone, not leaving, not doing anything except watching. I started the car and, out of reflex, looked at her one more time before pulling out. She was still in exactly the same place, in the same position, looking at me in a fixed way that didn't seem normal for someone who had just given up on a purchase. There was no sign that she was busy with something else, no distraction with her phone, nothing. Just standing there watching. That started to bother me in a more direct, almost physical way. I felt a tightness in my chest, like something was off and I hadn't fully understood it yet. I put the car in gear and left the spot, trying to act normal but without taking her out of my sight through the mirror. As I drove away, she slowly turned her body to keep following me with her eyes. That gave me immediate discomfort because it felt too deliberate. As I was leaving the parking lot, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that she finally started walking, but not toward any store. She walked to a car parked a few spaces away from where I had been. It wasn't a noticeable car, just a regular sedan, kind of dark, hard to even tell the color in that light. She opened the driver's door and got in. I didn't wait to see more. I drove straight out to the main road, trying to focus only on driving. But after a few seconds, the thought came, what if she starts following me? That made me automatically check the side mirrors and the rearview mirror. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. A few cars passing, light traffic, everything normal. But as I continued driving at one of the traffic lights, I saw a similar car stop 2 lanes behind me. I couldn't be sure it was the same one, but the possibility made my body tense again. When the light turned green, I went straight as I normally would, but without that previous sense of calm. I started paying attention to every car around me, especially the one behind. It didn't do anything obviously strange, just followed the flow, keeping a normal distance. Even so, I couldn't get out of my head the way she had been staring at me in the parking lot. It didn't feel like a random coincidence. Instead of going straight home, I decided to change my route. I turned onto a different street, busier, with more stores, more people, just to see if someone was really following me or if it was just my imagination. The car behind made the same turn. Right then, my stomach tightened. It could still be a coincidence, of course, but it was already the second change in direction. I kept driving for a few more minutes, making 2 more route changes, turning into streets that didn't make sense for my normal way home. In all of them, after a few seconds, that same car appeared behind me again, always keeping a safe distance. Nothing aggressive, nothing that I could clearly point to as direct pee-chewing. But it was constant. I felt my hands start to sweat on the steering wheel and my breathing became shorter. My mind was already trying to build a plan. Don't go home. Don't stop somewhere empty. Find a place with people. That's when I saw a larger gas station, well lit, with several pumps and a busy convenience store. I pulled in without thinking twice and parked right in front of the entrance, where there was more movement. I turned off the car but didn't get out right away. I spent a few seconds looking in the rearview mirror, trying to see if that car would also come in. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my neck, and my hands were still slightly damp. A few cars passed the station entrance, others pulled in normally, but that specific one took a few seconds to appear. When it did, it entered slowly, like any other, and drove past me as if it had nothing to do with me. I tried to see who was driving, but the reflection on the windows and the lighting didn't help. The car continued to one of the pumps further back and stopped. That didn't reassure me. If anything, it made the situation even stranger, because it didn't seem like a simple coincidence, but there still wasn't anything clear enough for me to react more directly. I decided to get out of the car and go inside the store, more to put myself near other people than anything else. The cold air conditioning hit my sweaty skin, and I realized how tense I was. I grabbed a bottle of water just to have an excuse to stay inside for a few minutes. I stayed near the register, occasionally glancing out the window, trying not to make it obvious that I was watching. After a while, I saw the car door outside open. The same woman got out. She didn't go straight to the pump, didn't grab anything to refuel. She just stood next to the car for a few seconds, looking toward the store. It wasn't a random look. It was directed. I felt a chill run up my spine. It no longer made sense to convince myself this was a coincidence. She stayed out there for a few seconds that felt much longer than they actually were. I tried to act normal, paid for the water, but didn't leave the register area. I leaned slightly against the counter, pretending to be on my phone just so I wouldn't be exposed outside. At one point, when I looked up, I saw that she had taken a few steps toward the store entrance queue and stopped. She didn't come in. She just stood there near the glass door as if deciding something. I felt my body tense up again, that alert feeling returning even stronger. It wasn't just discomfort anymore, it was fear. Because this had gone far beyond any normal buying and selling situation a long time ago. I waited a few more seconds, trying to think quickly about what to do. I didn't want to walk out and run into her outside. So I turned to the cashier and asked quietly if there was another exit in the back. She looked a bit confused but pointed to a side hallway that led to a service door. I thanked her and walked quickly without looking back. The hallway was narrow, a bit poorly lit, and led directly to a smaller outdoor area where some employee cars were parked. As soon as I stepped outside, the hot air hit my face again, and I felt the contrast with the cold inside the store. I got into my car without thinking twice, locked everything, and started it immediately. I left through another street, completely different from my usual route. I drove for several minutes without looking around much, just focused on putting as much distance as possible between me and that place. My heart was still racing, and it took me a while to be able to breathe deeply again. After some time, when I was already in a much busier area, I stopped at a traffic light and finally grabbed my phone. There was a new message from her. It was short. "You left through the wrong door." I felt a tightness in my chest immediately, as if that confirmed everything I had been trying to avoid thinking about. I didn't reply. I didn't block her right away either. I just stared at that sentence for a few seconds, trying to understand how that was even possible. To this day, what bothers me the most isn't even the fact that she knew things about me. It's knowing that even when I thought I had left discreetly, she was still somehow keeping track of me. After that, I completely stopped selling things like that. And every time I leave my building in the morning, I can't help but look around, trying to see if there's someone there who already knows more about me than they should. Story 3. I am 32 years old and I live alone on the outskirts of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I work with HVAC system maintenance, so I spend a good part of my day going in and out of clients' homes. I've always liked old furniture, especially the simpler solid wood ones because they tend to last much longer than newer stuff. That week I was looking for a small console table to put in my living room, near the wall where I leave my keys and some everyday tools. Nothing too specific, I just wanted something functional with a bit of personality. I ended up finding a listing on a local classifieds website. It was an old piece of furniture, a bit worn but well preserved. The price was fair, Not too cheap, not expensive. The photos were few, but enough to see the shape and details. The seller replied quickly when I messaged him, said it was still available and that I could pick it up the same day in the late afternoon. The address was about 30 minutes from where I live, in a more rural area with only a few scattered houses. Nothing unusual for that region. I went there straight from work, already near the beginning of the evening. The road became emptier as I got farther from the city. Smaller roads, less lighting, more trees and open land. When the GPS finally indicated I had arrived, I turned onto a short dirt road that led to a more isolated house. It was a simple 2-story house with somewhat worn paint and a large yard, but not well maintained. There was no fence, just an open space with a few trees and a car parked near the side. I stopped in front and turned off the engine. The silence there was very different from the city. Heavier, no traffic noise, just some distant insect sounds. I sent a message saying I had arrived. I waited a bit. Nothing. I knocked on the door after about 2 minutes. It took longer than normal for someone to answer. I stood there looking around, noticing the details of the house, trying to hear some movement inside, but everything was too quiet. After almost a minute standing there, I heard some movement inside, like dragging footsteps on the floor. The doorknob turned slowly, and a man opened the door just enough to look outside first, as if confirming who I was. He looked to be in his 50s, thinning hair, somewhat tired expression. When he opened the door more, he gave a quick automatic smile and said something like, "You came for the furniture, right?" I confirmed, and he nodded but didn't immediately make space for me to enter. He stood there for a second longer than normal, looking at me as if evaluating something. Then he stepped aside and told me to come in. As soon as I walked through the door, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't strong, but it was a closed-in smell, like a house that stays shut for too long, mixed with old wood. The lighting inside was dim, just a few lights on in specific spots. The living room was simple, with few pieces of furniture, all somewhat old but organized. I took a few steps inside, and that's when I saw it. The piece of furniture I had seen in the listing was there against the wall, exactly like in the photos. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the immediate sense of recognition beyond normal. It wasn't just it looked similar, it was too identical. There was a specific scratch on the right side near the base and a small darker mark on the top, as if something hot had been placed there. My stomach tightened immediately because I had seen those marks before, not in a photo, in my house. I have a piece of furniture exactly like that in my living room, with those same marks. And it's not a common model. It's an older type that you don't easily find repeated like that. In that moment, I just stood there staring, trying to understand what exactly was bothering me so much. I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence, that old furniture often looks similar, that maybe someone made several identical pieces years ago. But the more I looked, the more details matched exactly. It wasn't just the scratch or the stain. It was the wear on the corners, the way the wood was slightly lighter in certain areas, even a small unevenness in one of the drawers. It didn't feel similar. It felt like the same piece. I felt a discomfort rising in my chest, that kind of sensation that doesn't have an immediate logical explanation, but your body recognizes before your mind can organize it. I remember running my hand along the side almost without realizing, just to confirm what I was already seeing. The man was behind me, closer than I expected. I hadn't heard him approach. When I slightly turned my head, I saw that he was watching me, not exactly with curiosity, but with too much attention, as if he was waiting for a specific reaction from me. That made me even more tense. I tried to act normal, asked something basic like how long he had owned the piece just to break the silence. He answered vaguely, saying he'd had it for a while, that he got it from someone he knew. Nothing very detailed. The answer didn't help at all. I kept looking at the furniture, trying to find some difference that would make me feel better about it, but I couldn't find any. Then he said, in the same calm tone as before, almost as if commenting on something trivial, "You live alone, right?" That made me freeze inside. I hadn't said anything about my personal life at any point. It took me a second to respond, because it completely caught me off guard. My first reaction was to think maybe I had mentioned something without realizing in the online conversation, but I knew I hadn't. We had only talked about the furniture, the price, and the time. Nothing else. I answered something neutral like going, "Why?" trying to buy time and understand where that came from. He shrugged with an expression that barely changed and said, "Nothing. It just seems like it." The way he said it wasn't aggressive nor strange in tone. It was strange because it felt too specific to be just a random comment. I felt my breathing become shorter, and I became more aware of the space around me, the distance to the door, the faint sounds of the house, which remained too quiet. I took a step back almost automatically, as if trying to create a little distance without making it obvious. My eyes kept going back to the furniture, trying to make sense of it. That's when I had a somewhat impulsive idea. I took my phone out of my pocket and opened a photo of my living room that I'd taken a few weeks earlier. I usually take photos when I organize something, just to have a reference later. It took me a moment to find it because my hands were slightly shaking, but when I did, I felt an immediate chill. I zoomed in on the corner where the furniture appears. It was the same. Same mark on the side, same stain on top, same wear. There was no way it was coincidence at that level. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, feeling a strange pressure in my chest, like something was very wrong and I still didn't understand what. I lowered the phone slowly, trying not to show how much that had affected me. My mind was racing, trying to piece together some explanation that made sense. I thought maybe someone could have entered my house, swapped the furniture, done something without me noticing. But none of that was plausible. I work all day, but still that would require a level of planning that didn't make sense for an old piece of furniture. And even then, it wouldn't explain why that guy had another identical one there. I felt a very strong need to leave, but at the same time I didn't want to react abruptly and make the situation worse. So I said I needed to think about it more, that maybe I would come back another day. He didn't insist. He just kept looking at me with that same neutral expression, as if he had already expected that response. When I started moving toward the door, I noticed he didn't step aside to clear the way like before. He stayed there between me and the exit, not completely blocking it, but close enough to make me slow down. I felt my body become more rigid, trying to keep everything under control. When I passed by him, I smelled that scent again, stronger this time, mixed with something I couldn't quite identify. I opened the door and stepped outside without looking back. The air outside felt colder, lighter, and I only realized how tense I had been when I took a deep breath for the first time since entering. I got into the car quickly, locked the doors, and started the engine immediately. My hands were slightly shaking on the steering wheel. I pulled away and began leaving the property, glancing at the rearview mirror almost instinctively. He had stepped outside and was standing in the doorway watching me. He didn't wave, didn't say anything, just stood there. As I drove away down the dirt road, that strange feeling didn't go away. In fact, it only got worse. Because now it wasn't just about that piece of furniture. It was about the fact that somehow it had already been part of my home before I even got there. When I got home, it was already dark. I parked in front and stayed for a few seconds looking at the living room window. Everything seemed normal, lights off, nothing out of place. Even so, I felt a discomfort before getting out of the car, like I was about to enter a place I didn't fully know. I opened the door, went inside, and turned on the living room light immediately. The furniture was there exactly where it had always been. I walked closer slowly, examining every detail again. I ran my hand along the side, felt the scratch, the texture of the wood, the same mark. Everything identical. I walked around it, trying to find any difference, anything that would tell me I was mistaken. I found nothing. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking of different possibilities, none of them fully made sense. The next day, before leaving for work, I went back to the living room to look at the furniture again. And that's when I noticed something I'm sure wasn't there before. On the back, near the base, there was a small mark, like someone had scratched it with something sharp. It wasn't deep, but it was recent. You could tell by the color of the exposed wood. I hadn't seen that the night before. And I know that detail wasn't there before. Since then, I can't look at that piece of furniture the same way anymore. I can't explain what happened. I just know that somehow it doesn't feel completely mine anymore. Story 4. I am 24 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado. At the time this happened, I was finishing college and trying to save money by selling some things I no longer used. I had a laptop that was still in good condition, but it no longer met what I needed for my course, so I decided to list it on a local sales app. I had sold other things before and always took precautions. Public place, busy hours, no giving out my home address. This time, someone contacted me interested in the laptop, asked some basic questions, requested extra photos, and seemed normal. We agreed to meet at a cafe downtown, a very busy place with lots of people constantly coming and going. I chose that cafe specifically because it made me feel safer. The time was also good, early afternoon, still daylight, plenty of activity on the street. On the day, I left home with the laptop in my backpack, already a bit anxious to get it over with quickly. Traffic downtown was normal, a bit busy, but nothing unusual. I managed to park in a parallel spot about a block away from the cafe and stayed in the car for a few minutes, just checking the conversation, the time, those things. That's when my phone vibrated. It was the buyer. The message said something like, "Can you meet me in the parking lot next to it? I'm in a hurry." I thought that was strange right away because we had already agreed on the cafe, and changing it last minute wasn't something I liked. Still, I replied asking which parking lot exactly. He sent the location right after. It was very close, about 1 or 2 minutes by car. Even so, that already started to bother me slightly. I sat there for a few seconds staring at the message, trying to decide whether to accept or not. Part of me wanted to just say no and stick with the cafe, but at the same time I thought maybe it was just someone really in a hurry, trying to make things easier. That happens a lot here. Even so, I already felt that slight discomfort, like something wasn't completely right. I replied that I would stop by quickly, but that I preferred to get it done fast. I started the car and drove to the parking lot he had sent. It was one of those open parking lots between buildings, no cover, with some spaces marked on the ground and simple lighting. When I turned the corner and entered, the first thing that caught my attention was how empty it was. Not completely empty, but with very few cars scattered around. Very different from the cafe, which always has constant movement. I slowed down and drove in slowly, looking around. There was no one walking, no one near the cars, no movement. Just a few parked vehicles and the distant sound of the main street. I parked in a spot closer to the entrance so I wouldn't be too deep inside. I left the car running instinctively and sat there for a few seconds, looking around, waiting for someone to appear, maybe approach with a phone in hand or wave. Nothing. I grabbed my phone and sent a message saying I had arrived. The reply came almost immediately. "I'm already here." That made me look around again, this time more carefully, trying to find any sign of someone watching me. I looked from side to side, adjusted the angle using the rearview mirror, the side windows, even leaned forward a bit to see better between the more distant cars. There was no one. Not someone walking, not someone standing on their phone. Nothing. My body started to tense up without me realizing, that light alert feeling rising. I replied asking where exactly he was, trying to keep things normal. It took a few seconds and then the message came, "I can see you." That gave me an immediate chill. I automatically looked around again, faster this time, trying to identify anyone who could be watching me, but I still couldn't see anyone. I felt my breathing change, becoming shorter, and my attention became completely focused on the environment. I turned off the radio that had been playing softly, just so I could hear any sound around me better. Nothing. Just the low hum of my car's engine and some distant noise from the street. I started thinking about leaving right then, turning around and going straight back to the cafe. But at the same time, I was worried I might be overreacting, that it could just be someone inside a car I hadn't noticed. Even so, something didn't fit. I sent another message asking if he could step out of the car or wave, anything so I could identify him. The reply came quickly again. "No need. You can get out." I stared at that message for a few seconds without doing anything. My instinct was already telling me not to get out of the car, but I still tried to stay rational, looking for a logical explanation. Maybe he was inside a car with tinted windows, maybe he didn't want to get out for some reason, I don't know. Still, it didn't feel like a normal buying situation. I looked around again, this time trying to identify any car with someone inside. Some had darker windows. Others reflected light in a way that made it impossible to see inside. But none showed any movement, no one opening a door, no one using their phone, nothing. I felt a knot in my stomach, like my body was insisting I shouldn't get out. Before I could make any decision, my phone vibrated again. Another message. "You came alone, right?" That completely froze me. I hadn't mentioned anything about that at any point. I felt a cold sensation run up my spine, and my hand stayed still on the steering wheel for a second. I looked around again, now more urgently, trying to locate anyone who might be watching me closely. I started paying attention to details. A car farther away with dark windows, another with the seat reclined, a third parked near a column. Everything seemed potentially wrong, even without anything clearly happening. I didn't reply this time. I sat there for a few more seconds trying to decide what to do without panicking. My heart was already beating faster, and I felt that tension throughout my body, especially in my shoulders and chest. I looked at my phone again, as if expecting another message that would explain everything, but nothing came. So I made a simple decision: leave. Without replying, without getting out of the car, without trying to understand anything further. I put the car in gear and started pulling out of the space slowly, trying not to look desperate but ready to accelerate if needed. While maneuvering, I checked the rearview mirror and the sides, trying to see if any car reacted, if anyone started moving. As soon as I aligned the car toward the exit, my phone vibrated again. I didn't want to look, but I did anyway, almost out of impulse. The message said, "No need to leave now." That made my stomach drop. Because I hadn't said anything, hadn't given any sign I was leaving, and yet he knew. I didn't think anymore. I pressed the accelerator and drove straight out of the parking lot. As soon as I turned onto the main street, I merged into traffic and kept driving without looking back for a few seconds. Then, when I finally checked the rearview mirror, I saw a car leaving the parking lot right after me. I couldn't be sure it was him, but the feeling was immediate. I kept driving without a clear destination, just trying to stay on busier streets. The car behind me followed as well, maintaining a distance that seemed normal for traffic, but too consistent to be simple coincidence. I started testing it, turning onto streets that weren't part of the route back home. I turned right, then left, then entered a larger avenue. In all those changes, after a few seconds, that same car appeared behind me again. It didn't accelerate, didn't honk, didn't try to overtake, it just followed. My whole body was tense. My hands started sweating on the wheel and my breathing became short. I felt like any wrong decision could make the situation much worse. That's when I saw a large supermarket ahead, with a full parking lot and lots of people going in and out. I pulled in without thinking twice and parked near the entrance, right where there was more movement. I turned off the car but didn't get out immediately. I looked through the rearview mirror, waiting to see if the car would also enter. A few seconds later, it did. It didn't come directly toward me. It passed by and parked a few spaces farther away. I tried to see who was driving, but I couldn't make it out clearly because of the distance and lighting. My heart started racing again. I knew I couldn't just walk out as if nothing was happening, but I also didn't want to stay stuck inside the car. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm my body enough to think clearly. I grabbed my phone, held it tightly, and opened the car door, looking around before stepping out. The air outside was cooler, and the movement of people going in and out of the supermarket gave me some sense of safety. Even so, I couldn't help but glance again toward the car parked farther away. It was still there with no one getting out. That made me even more uncomfortable, because it didn't seem like someone who was actually there to shop. I went inside the store and headed straight to the busiest area, near the checkout lanes, trying to blend in with people. I stayed there for a few minutes, wandering aimlessly through the aisles, just waiting for my body to calm down a bit. From time to time, I discreetly looked toward the entrance, trying to see if someone would come in who might be the same person. Nothing. After a while, I decided to go to the checkout just to have a reason to stay near the front. I bought a bottle of water and stood nearby, pretending to use my phone. That's when it vibrated again. It was the buyer. The message said, "There's no point staying in there." I felt an immediate chill run up my spine. My stomach tightened and I automatically looked toward the glass doors. Outside, standing near one of the carts, there was someone looking toward the entrance. I couldn't see the face clearly because of the reflection and distance, but it was clear the person was just standing there, too still, doing nothing except watching. It didn't look like someone waiting for someone else. It looked like someone waiting for me. I quickly looked away, trying not to draw attention, but my body was already on full alert again. This was no longer within any normal situation. I didn't leave through the main entrance. I asked an employee if there was a side exit, and she pointed to a hallway that led to the delivery area. I walked quickly, trying not to look back, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. I exited through a side door that led to another part of the parking lot, much less busy, but still with some cars and enough light not to feel completely isolated. I got into the car quickly, locked the doors, and started the engine immediately. I left through a different street, trying to get as far away as possible. I didn't check the rearview mirror for a few seconds, just focused on driving. When I finally looked, I didn't see any car following me. Even so, I kept driving for several minutes, staying on busier roads, trying to make sure no one was behind me. My body took a while to relax. My hands were still tense on the wheel, and I had that lingering feeling that it wasn't completely over. When I stopped at a traffic light further ahead, I grabbed my phone again. There was one last message from him. "You left too early." I didn't reply. I blocked the contact immediately. But to this day, what bothers me the most isn't even the fact that someone tried to lure me into an empty place. It's knowing that, at several moments, it felt like he knew exactly where I was and what I was doing, even though I couldn't see anyone nearby. Story 5. I am 31 years old and I live on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. At the time, I was trying to sell a bicycle that I barely used anymore. I had bought it during the pandemic, used it for a few months, and then it ended up sitting in the garage. Since it was taking up space and was still in good condition, I decided to list it on a local sales app. Nothing very different from what I had done before. I took some photos, wrote a simple description, and set the price as slightly negotiable. In the first few days, I got some messages, but nothing too serious. Then a guy reached out showing a lot of interest. He asked detailed questions, wanted to know measurements, the condition of the parts, even asked about small scratches on the frame. He seemed like someone genuinely interested in buying. But as the conversation went on, it started to get strange. Every time I tried to set a time, he wouldn't confirm. He would always say something like, "Maybe later," or "I'll see if I can stop by tonight." He was never direct. And the strangest part was that he kept suggesting changing the location. At first, I had proposed a parking lot near a supermarket, a busy place like I always do. But he suggested another spot, then another, always different places and a bit more remote. Not completely isolated, but each time less busy. I started to feel uncomfortable about it, but since he seemed genuinely interested and kept responding, I continued the conversation for a few days. Even so, something didn't quite add up. After a few days of going back and forth, I was almost giving up. It was exhausting trying to set a time and never getting a direct answer. But one night, he sent a message saying he could meet that same day, within about 30 minutes. It was later than I would normally accept. It was already dark, but not so late that it was completely unusual. I hesitated a bit, but since I wanted to get it over with, I ended up agreeing. He suggested a quiet residential street, saying it was on his way. I still tried to steer it toward a busier place, but he insisted it would be quicker and easier there. I thought that since it was a residential area, it might still be safe enough. Even so, I already had that slight feeling of discomfort. I put the bicycle on the car rack and left. The drive was relatively short, about 15 minutes, but as I got closer, the streets became quieter. It was a normal neighborhood, houses lined up, some lights on, others already off. There weren't many people outside, but that's not unusual at night. I arrived at the location he had sent and parked by the curb. I got out of the car, took the bicycle down, and kept it next to me. The air was colder, that kind of calm night with little wind. I looked around, expecting to see someone approaching, maybe with a phone in hand, but there was no one. I sent a message saying I had arrived. He saw it almost immediately, but didn't reply right away. I stood there holding the bicycle, looking up and down the street. Some houses had lights on in the living room. You could see TVs on, normal activity inside, but no one outside. The silence was that typical nighttime neighborhood quiet, with an occasional car passing farther away. After about 2 minutes, my phone vibrated. It was him. The message said, "I'm around here." I immediately lifted my head, looking around more carefully, trying to locate where that was coming from. But I didn't see anyone. No one walking, no doors opening, nothing. I replied, asking exactly where he was. This time, the response took a little longer, and while I waited, I started to feel that subtle tension in my body, like something was off. That's when I noticed a car parked farther ahead, on the other side of the street. At first glance, there was nothing special about it. It was a regular sedan, kind of dark, parked parallel to the curb. I hadn't noticed it before, or maybe I had and just didn't pay attention. But now, for some reason, my attention was fixed on it. The car was completely dark, no interior lights, no headlights, and I couldn't see if anyone was inside because of the reflection from the streetlights. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to notice any movement, but nothing happened. My phone vibrated again. Another message. No need to keep looking so much. Right then, I felt that cold drop straight in my stomach. I hadn't even realized how much I had been staring at the car until he commented on it. It was automatic. I looked away immediately, as if someone really was watching me closely. My body stiffened and I felt my shoulders tense up. I tried to act like it was just a coincidence, like he could be arriving from somewhere else and had seen me. But it didn't fit. I looked again, this time more discreetly, just out of the corner of my eye, and the car was exactly the same, still, with no sign of movement. The street remained quiet, no one appearing. I sent a message asking if he was inside that car, trying to be direct. It took a few seconds and then the reply came. Wait a little longer. That only made the feeling worse. It wasn't a confirmation, it wasn't a denial. It was just another way to keep me there. I started thinking about leaving, putting the bike back on the car and driving away without explanation. But at the same time, I froze for a few seconds, as if trying to figure out whether I was overreacting. I looked again at the car, this time more intently, trying to see through the glass. Nothing. No movement, no shadow, no change in reflection. Just that parked car. Then, without any warning, the engine turned on. The sound of the engine starting completely broke the silence of the street. It was a quick, sharp noise, but enough to make my body react immediately. I felt a surge of adrenaline, like my body understood before my mind what that meant. The headlights didn't turn on, just the engine running. The car stayed still for a few seconds, which was even worse than if it had driven off right away. Because it felt deliberate, like it was waiting for something. I took an instinctive step back, bringing the bike closer to my car, already thinking about how to load everything as quickly as possible. Then it started moving, very slowly. It wasn't a normal departure, not a typical maneuver. It simply pulled out from where it was parked and began moving toward me, keeping a very low speed, almost like it was controlling every meter. I could hear the faint sound of the tires on the asphalt, and it stood out even more because there were no other sounds on the street. My heart started racing and I felt my hands begin to sweat. I didn't wait any longer. I grabbed the bicycle however I could without worrying about positioning it properly, and started lifting it to put it on the rack. I was in too much of a hurry. My hands were slipping slightly on the frame and I almost dropped it in the process. The car kept approaching, always at that same slow speed. With no headlights, no honking, no sign that it was just someone passing through the street. There was nothing normal about it at all. I managed to hook the front wheel onto the rack, but it wasn't completely secure, and I didn't have the patience to fix it properly. My priority at that moment was just to get into the car and get out of there as fast as possible. As I did that, I could feel the car getting closer, even without looking directly at it. When I finally shut the driver's door, my hands were shaking enough that I missed the ignition the first time. On the second try, the car started, and I didn't think twice. I put it in gear and drove off quickly, not even properly checking the sides. As soon as I started moving, I looked in the rearview mirror. The car behind me stopped for a second as if deciding something, and then started moving again, now turning in the same direction I had gone. That made my stomach drop again. I accelerated more, trying to create distance. I kept driving for a few blocks, trying to stay in control, but with my mind completely focused on getting out of that situation. I didn't follow my usual route home. Instead, I turned onto different streets, trying to see if he was really following me or if it was just a coincidence. At first, I didn't see anything behind me, but after a sharper turn, when I looked in the rearview mirror again, I saw headlights appear in the distance. That immediately put me on alert. He wasn't right behind me, but he wasn't leaving either. He was keeping a constant distance, just like before. My whole body tensed again and my breathing became shallow. I started thinking quickly about what to do. I didn't want to stop somewhere empty, didn't want to go home, didn't want to slow down. So I headed toward a larger avenue where I knew there would be more traffic and more lighting. As I got closer, the flow of cars increased a bit, and I was able to blend in better with traffic. I looked in the rearview mirror one more time, and the car was no longer there. It hadn't turned with me at the last corner. It hadn't kept following, it had simply disappeared. That should have relieved me, but it didn't completely, because it didn't feel like it was over. It felt like he had simply decided to stop. When I finally got home, it was much later. I parked in front and stayed in the car for a few seconds, looking around before getting out. Everything seemed normal. The quiet street, the houses, no strange movement. Even so, I felt that hesitation before opening the door. I went inside, locked everything, and went straight to the living room. The bike was still poorly secured on the rack, and I only took it down after a few minutes when I could breathe better. I grabbed my phone to check if there were any new messages. There was one. It was from him. It just said, you were fast. I didn't reply. I blocked him immediately. But since that day, what bothers me the most isn't even the fact that someone followed me. It's thinking about how long that car had already been sitting there before I arrived, without me noticing. Story 6. I am 34 years old and I live in a smaller city in the state of Ohio, not far from Dayton. I work from home in administrative support, so I spend most of my time inside the house. At that time, I was trying to better organize my space because my kitchen is small, and I ended up deciding to sell an air fryer that I barely used anymore. It was in perfect condition, but I simply didn't have enough space to keep everything. I took some photos in the kitchen on the countertop with normal lighting, without showing much of the surroundings. I'm always careful with that. I avoid showing parts of the house that could identify where I live. I made the listing on a local app and kept the information very basic: model, usage time, price, and pickup to be arranged. On the same day, a few hours after posting, I received a message from a man who was interested. Up to that point, normal. But the way he started the conversation caught my attention. He barely asked anything. Instead, he immediately said that he knew the appliance was practically new, and that the inner tray had no signs of use. That surprised me a bit because those are things people usually ask or want to confirm. I replied saying yes, that it was well preserved, but I found it curious that he was already assuming that. Even so, I continued the conversation normally. But as he kept talking, comments started to appear that weren't about the product itself. He said something like, "I liked your gate, that darker tone looks good." At that moment, I found it strange, but I still tried to come up with a quick explanation in my head. I thought maybe some part of the gate had appeared in the background of one of the photos, even if only slightly. I didn't remember exactly all the angles I had taken. I responded neutrally, ignoring that comment and trying to bring the conversation back to the product. Right after that, he said, "Your car is also economical, right? That model usually doesn't use much fuel." That made me pause for a second. My car stays in the garage, visible only from the front of the house, and it definitely did not appear in the listing photos. I felt immediate discomfort, but I still tried to stay calm. I started mentally reviewing the photos I had posted, trying to remember if in any reflection or detail you could see anything beyond the kitchen. But nothing made sense. I opened the listing in the app and started looking at the images carefully, zooming in on each one. They only showed the countertop, the wall behind it, and the appliance. No open windows, no street reflections, nothing that revealed the outside of the house. My stomach started to tighten as I realized that. At the same time, my phone vibrated again. Another message from him. "It's easy to park in front there, right? Seems quiet." That didn't feel like coincidence or a guess anymore. It felt like he was describing things that only someone who had already been there could see. At that moment, I felt my body tense up without realizing it. That alert feeling started light but grew quickly. I replied briefly, something like, "I prefer to meet somewhere else," trying to shift the conversation without directly confronting him. He took a few seconds to respond, and that pause made me even more uncomfortable, because it felt like he was thinking about what to say. When the reply came, it was as if nothing had happened. "Sure, no problem, wherever you prefer." The tone was still normal, polite, but that didn't erase what he had already said. I started to feel like something wasn't right, even without having a clear explanation yet. I kept looking at the listing, zooming into the images, almost searching for some mistake I had made that could justify all of this. but there wasn't any. No information about the front of the house, about the gate, much less about the car. I stayed there for a few seconds, just staring at the screen, feeling that discomfort grow. Then my phone vibrated again. Another message. "Do you usually stay home at this time?" That made me freeze inside. It was no longer about the product nor about the house, it was about me. I didn't reply this time. I just stared at the message, trying to understand how far this was going. I put the phone down on the table for a few seconds, trying to organize what to do. My first reaction was to block and ignore, but at the same time, part of me wanted to understand how far this would go. Maybe it was someone trying to scare me. Maybe someone who had seen my house by chance and was exaggerating. Even so, the feeling wasn't just discomfort, it was exposure. I got up and went to the living room window without fully opening the curtain, just enough to take a look outside. Late afternoon was turning into night. Dimmer light, some houses with lights on. Everything looked normal. No one standing outside, no strange car in front. I stayed there for a few seconds, observing, trying to notice any unusual movement. Nothing. Even so, that feeling didn't go away. I went back to my phone and opened the conversation again. Before I could decide anything, another message came in. "I can stop by there quickly." That made my stomach tighten again. There was no doubt anymore that he knew where I lived. And the worst part was not knowing for how long. I immediately replied saying no, that I would not do the sale at my house, that I would only meet in a public place. He took a few seconds and replied, "That's fine, I already know the place anyway." The moment I read that, I felt a chill run up my spine. It was no longer a mild suspicion, it was too direct. I already know the place anyway, didn't leave much room for interpretation. I stayed still for a few seconds, staring at the screen, trying to decide whether to respond or not. My breathing was already shorter, and I started paying more attention to the sounds inside the house, as if anything could indicate someone nearby. Nothing. Just the faint sound of the refrigerator and some distant noise from the street. I tried to convince myself that maybe he was exaggerating, trying to sound more confident or something, but it didn't fit with everything else. I went to the front door quietly and looked through the peephole. The street was the same as before, calm, no one standing out front. Even so, I didn't feel relieved. I went back to the living room and picked up my phone again. Before I could block him, another message came in. "The gate makes a noise when it opens, right?" That gave me a real shock. Because it does. It's a light, slightly metallic noise that I always think about fixing and never do. And that doesn't appear in any photo, it's not something someone guesses. My body reacted instantly. I felt a strong tightness in my chest and my hands turned cold. I didn't reply anymore after that message. Right away, I went to the kitchen and turned off the light, then went back to the living room and turned that off too, leaving the house darker inside. I did that almost automatically, as if reducing visibility would give me some kind of protection. I stood still for a few seconds, trying to hear any sound coming from outside. My heart was beating harder, and I could feel it in my chest and throat. I went back to the window, this time opening the curtain a bit more, very slowly, trying not to make any sudden movement. I looked at the front of the house, at the gate, at the street, and that's when I noticed a car parked a little further down. It wasn't exactly in front of my house, but it was close enough to have a direct view of the gate. It was a regular car, dark, hard to identify clearly in that level of lighting. I didn't remember seeing it there before, but I also wasn't sure, because I hadn't paid that much attention the first time I looked. What bothered me was that it seemed like the engine was on, because you could see a slight vibration on the body under the streetlight. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to notice any movement inside, but I couldn't see anything through the windows. At the same time, my phone vibrated again in my hand. I already knew it was him before even looking at the screen. When I looked, the message said, "No need to turn off the lights." That shocked me so immediately that I instinctively pulled the phone slightly away from my face. My whole body reacted, a quick chill running through my chest and arms. I looked back at the street, directly at the car, trying to force my eyes to see inside, but it was still impossible to see who was there. Just that car parked, apparently running, with no visible movement. My breathing became shorter, and I felt the urge to step away from the window, as if being visible there would make everything worse. I slowly stepped back, trying not to make noise, and went to the bedroom. I grabbed my car keys and stood there for a few seconds, thinking about what to do. Staying there didn't feel safe, but Leaving didn't feel like a good idea either at that moment. I sent one last message asking directly, "Are you in front of my house?" It took a few seconds and then the reply came, "Just passing by." That didn't help at all. Because he wasn't passing by, he was parked. I went back to the living room and without turning on the lights, looked through the curtain gap once more. The car was still there. But now, after a few seconds, it started to move, very slowly, pulling out from where it had been parked. It wasn't a normal departure. It didn't accelerate, didn't turn quickly. It just started moving, passing in front of my house at low speed. I followed it with my eyes as it passed by the gate. Even then, I couldn't see who was inside. When it continued down the street and turned the corner, my body finally relaxed a little, but not completely. I stood there for a few more minutes, waiting to see if it would come back. Nothing. The street returned to its normal silence, as if nothing had happened. I went back to my phone and opened the listing again. I reviewed everything, every photo, every detail. There was absolutely nothing that showed the front of the house, the gate, the car. Nothing. I blocked the contact immediately and removed the listing. That night, it took me a long time to fall asleep. And to this day, what bothers me the most isn't just the fact that someone had been out there. It's knowing that before even sending me the first message, that person had already spent enough time observing my house.
Thank you very much for your company until the end. Your support is what gives life to this channel. If these stories have caught you, don't forget to leave your like and comment on your opinion. And if you are not yet part of our community, sign up now to receive the next real horror stories.